So initially I wanted to make a video on how you can use username and password with AWS IoT for authentication. And in that video, I wanted to show how you can migrate from, let's say, a Mosquitto broker where you're using username and password, and then you can migrate onto AWS IoT using the same authentication method, right? So for that, I had to create a Mosquitto messaging broker on AWS. I found a few blogs for that, like this one and this one as well. However, I kept facing some of the other issue. So some command would work, some error would coming, and I just could not figure it out. So I spent some time, did the research, and I created my own guide. So in this video, I'll go through exactly what you need to do in order to set up your own Mosquitto broker on AWS. So in this case, you will be able to authenticate with username and password, and also be able to use your own custom domain. So in this case, we are using the custom domain name mosquitto.theswarfdeveloper.win. Great. So that out of the way, let's get started. All right. So on the right, I'll have the set of steps open, and on the left, I'll have the AWS console open. Now, if you're going to be following the guide exactly, you need to have two prerequisites. The first one is going to be that you need to manage your DNS from Route 53. So here I have the swapdeveloper.win managed from the Route 53 console, and you need to also have issued certificates for that domain name. So here I have certificates issued for both the swapdeveloper.win as well as star.swapdeveloper.win. That being said, let's go ahead and start following the steps. So the first one is to create an Ubuntu instance. So I'll go to EC2 and launch an instance. I'll search for Ubuntu and select the latest one. Here I will choose the free tier eligible. Make sure that the public IP will be enabled. Select the default storage, default tags, and here I need to add a few ports. I'll add the ports for MQTT, HTTP, HTTPS, and the last one is going to be 1883. All right, so I'd also make sure it's available everywhere and launch. I'll use my own RSA key for authentication and launch the instance. While that is being created, I'll go ahead and select the public IP for this instance and create a Route 53 entry to point this domain to that IP, and I'll create a record for that. So I'll go ahead and create a record. A record is selected by default. I'll add the IP name, and I'll also give the name of the domain. And I'll click on create record. Great, so now we have this domain pointing to the EC2 instance where we'll be running our Mosquitto server.
A few minutes later.
Now that the broker is in running state, let's go ahead and connect to it. To do that, we'll use the Terminus application. Here I have to go ahead and create the new host. We'll call it Mosquitto. The address will be the public DNS of the EC2 instance. Username is going to be Ubuntu, and password will be the RSA key. Right, so let's save that and connect. Great, we're in. I'll go ahead and clear the screen. I'll also increase the font, and let's start copying the commands. The first one is going to be for an update. So let's do that. Next, we'll install Mosquitto. Mosquitto is installed. Let's test this out by subscribing to a topic. Right, so this means that I am able to subscribe. Cool. Now we have to allow a few ports on the local firewall. So the first one is 1883. The next one is going to be 22 for SSH, and let's enable the firewall. And yes. Okay, perfect. Now we need to restart Mosquitto to make sure that the firewall is in place. Great. So in the next step, we'll go ahead and start issuing the certificate for the domain name for this broker. First, we need certbot. Then do an update. Then install certbot. Next, we need to allow the ports for HTTP. We'll do that and then enable that as well. Perfect. In this step, we'll go ahead and create certificates for that domain name. Here we need to add our email address. So I'll add that. That done. We need to agree. I don't want any emails. And that's it. So our certificate is, I think, created. Perfect. Next, we need to create a cron job for these certificates to be rotated. Here I'll use Vim and I'll paste this at the end, right? Perfect. Next, we need to create a user for Mosquitto. So essentially, adding the username and password authentication. So in here, the username is the SWAF developer. And the password is going to be secret password. Perfect. Now we need to go into the configuration file and make sure that authentication is only allowed via username and password. So for that, we need to paste these two lines. Next, we need to restart Mosquitto to make sure that the changes take effect. Now let's test this out. So I'll try to make a subscribe call using the credential. So here username is going to be the SWAF developer and password is going to be secret password. So great, I'm able to subscribe. I'll create a duplicate terminal for that and try to publish a message to that topic. And we can see that we are getting messages over here. So I'll try sending it again. And here we saw the same hello world message over there. Great, so let's move on to the next step. Next, we need to make sure that the Mosquitto broker is using the domain name certificates so that we can include a CA while making the connect call or subscribe or publish. Right, so for that, we need to make a few changes in the configuration file. So here is our configuration file for now, and we'll go ahead and add the following details. Now what I've done is I've replaced the value of the domain name, and if you have your own domain name, you need to change that value as well. Perfect. So next, I'll go ahead and restart Mosquitto. Cool. So since we are having a listener on 883, we need to allow the ports for 883 as well. So we'll enable that port on the firewall as well. Now I've added the rule and I'll enable it as well. Perfect. And lastly, if we want to make a connect call from outside of the broker, we need to get access to the cert. So this is the CA cert that the broker has. Awesome. So essentially our configuration is complete. So we have done all three things. We have installed the MQTT Broker. We have added certificates for that domain name, and also we have enabled username and password authentication, right? So for now we have this one user that uses this password, and going forward, if there is going to be a connection from outside the broker, they need to use a certificate as well. Also, since I will be using this certificate to connect from my machine, I need to copy it and store it on my local device. So I'll go ahead and save that as well. I'll use the MQTT.fx software to make a connection with the broker. So here are the details that we need. The broker address is going to be this. Next, we need the port. So we're connecting over port 8883. The client ID, we'll just add, it doesn't really matter, but we're going to add the swap developer. Next, we need credentials, right? So for credentials, we need a username and we need the password as secret password. Lastly, we also need to give the CA certificate because we made sure to add that in the config file. So here I'll enable SSL TLS and I'll use a CA certificate file, and then I'll choose that file where I downloaded it, right? And then I'll click on OK, right? And then let's try to connect. Perfect. So we are able to create a connection with the IoT broker. Right. So what I'll do is I'll make a subscribe call here, subscribe to a topic and publish messages on it to demonstrate. To subscribe, I have the command right over here. So MQTT sub. Here you can see that we're using the CA path for that. And we're using the domain name and we're using the username and password. So let's go ahead and subscribe. And on MQTT-FX, let's publish a message on the test topic. So here, this is the test, and when I publish, I get the message over here, right? So this is working. We can do one more test where we can publish a message from the Mosquitto server itself using the same details. So in here, we're using the username and password, and we are also using the topic called test. Great, so publish was successful and we got the message here as well. Awesome. So as you can see, it was pretty straightforward. We just had to follow a few commands. If you want to dive deep into what we actually did, you can follow these blogs. I'll link them down in the description. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. Lastly, if you're trying to run these commands, the CLI commands from your macOS, I've added a few steps where you can download the certs directory directly into your macOS and then make the publish calls. So that'll work just fine. Thank you so much for going through this journey with me. You can find all the links in the description, and please subscribe for more videos.